guys, welcome back to my channel. Since I've moved abroad and spent so much of my life living outside of the US in the past few years, there are definitely certain kind of typically American things that I think I've stopped doing, or I do a lot less now, simply because it's not commonly done in the place where I'm living, which in this case is Paris, France right now. Sometimes it's kind of a conscious decision to stop doing something, to stop a habit that maybe feels a bit uncomfortable to do with people in the country where you're living, or isn't really acceptable in the country where you're living, or sometimes it's just over several months, over several years, you kind of stop doing something that used to be a habit simply because it's not typical. However, there are definitely certain things that seem to be kind of ingrained in me, and whether I've tried or whether I've not tried, the habit's not really gone away. This is something that everyone around the world can relate to if you're one of those people who grew up in pretty much one spot or at least one country. There are definitely going to be certain habits, certain tendencies, just certain things that you do that are very typical of that place. So what I want to talk about in this video are a few of these little habits that I can't seem to shake whether I want to or not. Some of them I have tried, some of them I haven't tried, but it's just certain things that are typically American that aren't really so common here. Little disclaimer, because I feel like I have to do it, not all Americans do these typically American things, and there are plenty of other places in the world where people do these typically American things. These are things that are more common in the US that I've noticed and experienced are not as common in other places of the world, specifically the place where I live now, France. Okay, disclaimer done. Let's get on to the video. Number one, and definitely the first thing that comes to mind if anyone would randomly ask me this in conversation, is smiling at strangers. I know I've mentioned this in videos before because it's definitely something that is a recurring problem for me, but my habit is if I meet eye contact with a stranger, or if I have any sort of little interaction in passing with a stranger, my automatic reaction is to smile. I am from the Midwest in the US, which, at least for Americans, is kind of known as the more friendly and open sort of place where people are a little bit more open to small talk, a little more open to smiling, to little exchanges. In France, and especially in Paris, which is known for having some of the rudest and more cold types of people, which is not 100% true, but is often true in my experience. People are a lot more like walled off. Smiling at a stranger can kind of send the wrong impression. I've gotten some weird looks from people before. I think I've caused some people to do a double take because maybe they thought they knew me or I knew them or something because I made the interaction. Maybe I'm also overthinking it some of the time because now I'm worried about causing those kind of uncomfortable reactions that I have. But I've definitely weirded some people out, that is safe to say. So this is actually one of the habits that I have tried to break since coming here. And I mean, if you catch me at the right time during rush hour traffic in the morning on the metro or in the evening coming home from work, I'm not the most smiley of people. Like, super easy to not be friendly Midwesterner when I'm in that situation. But generally on a day-to-day basis, my habit still is to somehow acknowledge if I meet eye contact with a stranger, whether it's in passing or on the metro or anywhere else, if we meet eye contact, I feel the need to do something, not just to kind of glare at them or to look away. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely a habit that I've tried to break to avoid some kind of uncomfortable situations because I know that it's just not as common to make those interactions with strangers in France as it is in the US, but I just can't wholly break the habit. It's just ingrained in me that it's rude not to smile at someone if you meet eye contact, or not to smile at your cashier as they're checking out your groceries. It's just, I like to smile at people. I can't help it. Another typically American thing that I still do from time to time is taking leftovers to go. This is starting to change in France, but generally taking doggy bags and taking your leftovers home is not really something that most people do. This is a huge generalization, but a lot of the French people that I know grew up with the mentality of finish your plate. So it's very much you eat everything that's on your plate. And also in French restaurants, portions tend to be a little bit more reasonably sized, whereas in the US you have huge portions. Unless you're like super hungry, you usually can't finish the portions. So therefore it's very logical that to-go boxes and things like that are so common. You eat what you want and then the rest of it you take home, you put in the fridge, and you have leftovers for later, which is like the best thing in the world. In France though, as a general rule, I feel like you're kind of just expected to finish your plate. But that does mean that when you can't finish your plate or when you don't want to finish your plate, food will go to waste unless you do the awkward awkward thing and ask for a to-go box. Like I said, this is starting to change, which is good because not all French portion sizes at restaurants are really manageable. So this is gradually changing, and the option to take home leftovers is becoming more and more of a possibility without having to feel awkward. But I still have been at restaurants before, not even necessarily upscale restaurants, but places where I've asked to take home leftovers and I've gotten a bit of a weird look, or they've gone okay, and then they go and wrap it up in some foil or something, and then it falls apart as I'm trying to carry it home, and it's not at all meant to be taken home. Of course, the ideal scenario would be that the plate would come out, it would be a size you could eat, you would eat it all, and you wouldn't have any need for leftovers or leaving food to waste or any of that. But of course the reality is that sometimes it doesn't happen, and I'm one of those people who doesn't like to eat giant meals and then eat nothing for ages. I'm kind of one of those smaller meals and then have a little snack later types of people. So that means that often portion sizes can just be a little bit too much for me to eat in one sitting. While we're on the subject of food and restaurants, let's talk about tipping. Tipping is a big deal in the US. It's a whole culture. I don't even understand it all, to be completely honest. And in a lot of European countries, including France, which is where I have the most experience, tipping is a lot rarer. When it comes to restaurants, really you would only tip if you had really good service, or if it's a really special restaurant and the waiter, I don't know, did something in some way that was special. In the US though, at most restaurants and even cafes where you have like actual table service, you're typically expected to tip. So it's definitely ingrained in me that when I go to a restaurant where I have a waiter who brings me my food, who comes and takes my order at the table and everything, I want to leave a tip. I don't always. I will say that this is a habit that I'm slowly breaking, that I'm slowly being able to actually leave a restaurant with service, but that isn't spectacular service, and not tip. I am starting to be able to do that, especially because if I go out with my husband who is French, he will tell me, you know, when I'm getting out my wallet, he's like, don't get a tip out, you don't need to tip at this place, it's okay. So that kind of helps, you know, he talks me down off the ledge, but it's still a habit and I still sometimes feel a little bit rude. It's a habit that is very difficult to break because it really is insulting in the US to not do it. I think I even sometimes have a bad influence on my husband because sometimes I'll start getting out my wallet to get out a few euros and he tells me, no, it's okay, you don't need to tip here. And my response is, are you sure? And then that little seed of doubt is planted, and then he starts feeling bad and he starts thinking, well, maybe I should tip here, and then we end up tipping a couple euros in a place where it probably wasn't really necessary or expected. When it comes to grocery shopping, another very typically American thing that I like to do, and I still do, is try to run all of my errands as much as possible in one place. In France, I know this has changed a lot because convenience has become so much more important in this super fast-paced modern world. God, I sound like an old person, but you know what I mean. It has changed, and you do have your mega stores where you can get a lot of stuff, but there are still a ton of people, especially more traditional people, older people. If you want just better products because it is better, you can still go to your specialized stores. So the boulangerie, the bakery for your bread, you can go to a patisserie for your sweets, a fromagerie for your cheese. On top of that, the pharmacy culture is a huge deal in France, and anything that is even vaguely related to health must be purchased in a pharmacy. It's not even available. So even stuff like pain reliever, even contact solution, you have to go to a pharmacy in order to get it. So whether it's enforced in situations like that where the pharmacy, you have to go to a pharmacy for that, or whether it's just people prefer to go and get your bread from a bakery, even though you can get it at, you know, your Monoprix and your Carrefour, your big sort of mega stores. There's definitely more of a mentality here to going to multiple stores when you do your errands. However, I am very much not used to this concept, especially because I didn't grow up in a big city. So wherever you went, you had to get in the car and you had to drive a few minutes each way. So making multiple stops, going to multiple different points all over could be quite complicated and it could be quite long. So generally, if it could be bought at a supermarket, where often it could, I would go to a supermarket and buy everything at that one place, and I still very much have this habit here. I do go to boulangeries when I want specifically good bread. I do go to a fromagerie if I want specifically good cheese, but it's just quite rare, and it's only on those special occasions where I want to treat myself. I want to go the extra mile, even though it's not a mile, because these things are on like every block practically. Okay, fromageries are not necessarily every block, but I actually have one not too far from my apartment, so I don't really have a good excuse. When it comes to that weekly routine though, and I have a list this long and I need to just go to the store and get all of my stuff, I will always go to a supermarket and just do a quick run, pick up everything I need, stock up the kitchen, and I'm good to go. I'm gonna wrap up this list with one final American habit that is very stereotypically me: drinking coffee. Literally every weekday of my life, now that I'm working back in a French office, I drink coffee on the go. My morning routine consists of waking up, making myself a giant French press of coffee, pouring it all into a tumbler, and then taking it with me to work. And this, while it does happen in France, and I have seen other people taking their coffees to go, it's still very unusual, and I still get looks, and I still specifically notice if I see someone else on the metro or on the street carrying a to-go cup, whether it's a paper cup or whether it's like a tumbler like mine, because I do take it in an actual like reusable tumbler. It's extremely unusual to see, honestly, but I still do it. And this is something that I tried to sort of break when I first came to France. I thought it felt a bit weird to be carrying my tumbler in the street, so I just decided I'd make coffee when I got to the office. But of course, then you have the issue of either having to bring your French press and everything to work, or you have to use like pod coffee. That's what a lot of people in my office use, which I don't like doing. Not only does it not taste as good as French press, but also it's not as good for the environment because you waste the pods and everything. So I like to make my French press. I like to know that I'm not contributing to more plastic in the environment, and the coffee is good. It's way better than pod coffee or Insta coffee or anything else that is convenient to make it work. And I've started to sort of just embrace it. I carry my coffee proudly as a coffee addict, and I am able to sort of bond with all the other people drinking coffee. Probably they don't think of it the same way, but I feel a little internal bond with anyone else that I see drinking coffee from a to-go mug. I do sit in cafes and do the sort of typical French thing of having a slow, relaxed coffee moment at a cafe. I do that too, but there's just no feasible way to do that before work in the mornings for me. It just doesn't work. I just cannot justify waking up earlier and losing sleep in order to have like an extra few minutes to have a coffee moment. I would rather just drink my coffee as I'm going. Those are just a few of the random habits that I've noticed specifically that I still have, that I still do from time to time, or very frequently in the case of some, but I'm sure there are other things that I still am doing. Maybe I'll ask my husband if he can point out a few more for a future video. If you want to see another video sort of like this, or I can talk about it on Instagram or make a blog post about it or something, just let me know what you want to see. If you're also living abroad, or if you have lived abroad in the past, let me know in the comments some of the sort of funny or random things that you have continued to do from your home country that are not really that typical in the place where you live. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you soon.